took a lot to make this happen. We have this room on loan for about the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes, so I'll try to make the best of that time. I am a little nervous. I haven't really spoken to this large a group before. Like I said, I wanted to thank everyone for being here, and I'm a little nervous, so I just put up with me, okay? All right, so I am presenting my thesis paper basically on this PowerPoint presentation. My thesis topic revolved around investigating interest in an equine assisted learning program for special needs students at an urban middle school. The urban middle school in question, just to give you a little background, is the middle school that I work at. I'm currently a special ed teacher, and that's where I conducted the study. Can everyone see the slides? I can't seem to turn off just one set of lights. They all have to stay on, or they all have to come off, and it's too dark. So can everyone see? Yeah? Awesome. Okay. So this is the topic of my thesis study, investigating interest in an equine assisted learning program for special needs students at an urban middle school. Next slide. So a little bit about the topic. The effects of equine assisted services, which as some of you may know because I know you've come down to the ranch with me on a couple of occasions, Nathaniel. I know you went down to the ranch with me. Remember, you were with, what's the horse's name that we worked with?
Romeo.
Romeo, exactly. So equine assisted services are basically services involving horses and humans. And during the sessions, basically horses and humans interact with each other to achieve a goal. Sometimes it's something as simple as just social interaction. Other times there could be emotional goals involved, physical goals involved, such as therapeutic services. But the effects of equine assisted services have been recorded through centuries. Excuse me. There's a limited amount of curriculum available, sorry about that, limited amount of curriculum available that is directly related to the special needs population. And that was one of the limiting factors of this study, but I'll get into that in a little bit here. There are also some challenges in funding. And schools are always looking for alternative sources of funding in order to promote programs such as equine assisted services. So those were some of the discussion topics that were addressed during my thesis study, specifically during the literature review portion of it. Alright, so the purpose of the thesis study. The purpose of my thesis study was to assess interest in an EAL program for special needs students at an urban middle school, and I know that's a restatement of the topic at the beginning of the paper, but basically that's what it is. I just wanted to know, is there any interest out there for a program such as EAL at a middle school? I would hope that at the end of this project that it would serve as a useful guide to other educators, professionals, and individuals interested in knowing the basics of what it would take to bring such a program to their school or their community. Good? Okay. And it was meant to provide a basic informative guide that may be used as part of a process that explores interest in EAL in a middle school. The significance of this study is to provide a concise description of what EAL is, its educational relevancy, and how we can use it to supplement the traditional classroom setting and its curriculum as future reference for you guys, for parents, for students, for staff members, in an urban middle school setting, of course. Here are the limitations of this study. I just touched on this a little bit. There was some obvious researcher bias in this study because of the nature of my position as a special ed middle school teacher. The decision for inclusion and exclusion criteria of the students that would participate and the individuals that would participate was basically up to me, the researcher. So there was some bias in that as well. The study was limited to a population of students with mild to moderate learning disabilities. And this resulted in an issue of equity due to the exclusion of general education students from the study. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. It was a completely voluntary study, which meant that certainly it could limit the amount of responses that I would receive. And in general, because it was only, the study was limited to special needs population, we'll get into that here in a minute, there was obviously already kind of a limiting factor when it comes to how many individuals would be available for this survey. All right, some definition of terms that were addressed during the thesis study. A case study is a form of qualitative research used to look at individuals, a small group of individuals or a whole group. I conducted a case study. That's all good. I conducted a case study during this particular research project. Curriculum is basically an outline of what will be taught, and I know some of you are educators, some of you are parents, and I know that curriculum is a word that most of us are accustomed to. Descriptive analysis. A descriptive analysis is basically an analysis, a description of an analysis of data that provides a concise or a very brief snapshot of the situation that's under study. Equine Assisted Learning, which is what this is all about, is basically a equine assisted service, a horse-related service in which learning skills such as life skills, relational skills, or communication skills are addressed. They are the focus of the service. There is no mental health focus involved with equine assisted learning. There is an equine assisted service branch that deals with that. It's equine facilitated mental health, but that's not what this is. We only focus on educational goals. Experiential learning is based on the idea that change and growth take place when people are actively engaged, kinesthetically involved in the process of learning. Facilitating is the process of guiding, helping, assisting, and creating others. And a special needs student is described as a person between the age of 3 to 21 years of age who, by reason of one or more of the following conditions, are unable to receive reasonable benefit from general education. It could be learning disability, it could be a mental disability, it could be a physical disability. But for it to be a special needs student, they would need to be between the age of 3 to 21 years of age. Questions? Okay. You guys are awesome. There was also, as part of this study, I did a brief literature review. It was fairly extensive in its scope, but very focused. I read about experiential learning, a lot about experiential learning in order to understand the concept of EAL, because that is the basis of EAL, experiential learning, that hands-on learning. Equine Assisted Learning was also a focus of the literature review. Special needs population and EAL was within the focus of the literature review. Development of curriculum and funding. Funding was huge because, as you all know, as part of the community, cuts in budgets are a big thing right now. Schools are struggling to find funds for traditional programs such as art and music. Jordan, your presence is requested elsewhere.
Me?
Yes, me. Jordan Mott, actually. Take your stuff, bud. Not sure. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. You're doing good.
Jordan, I'll put this right here, buddy. Take it with you so I can continue and we can conclude this, because I know there's people that need to have places to go. Thanks, bud. So, like I was saying, funding is huge. We can't justify funding an extracurricular program such as EAL when there are other programs that are more traditional to the school setting, such as art and music, that are being cut. Oh, no worries, bud. It's all good. It's part of being here. There you go. That's okay. All right, design and methods. Do you need help with that? The study consisted of surveying a small pool of participants, which is kind of why you're all here, is to find out what the survey results were. And I appreciate you being so interested. The survey itself was aimed at collecting the opinions and feedback of participants. Again, to address that question of whether there was enough interest in the school setting to support an EAL program. The purpose of the study was also to use the survey as a method of collecting qualitative data that would be relevant and viable for the purposes of answering the thesis question. And I believe we've achieved that goal, or I've achieved that goal through the survey. So it's coming up in just a minute. Another research method that I considered for this study was to do a contextual literature review, which would have been a much more in-depth review of literature that would have provided more of a critical analysis of the literature on the topic. However, there's really not. Once I started looking into what was available, I realized that there isn't really much scientific literature that's been published out there for the specific topic of interest in EAL at a middle school setting, in an urban middle school setting. I also felt that the experiential nature of EAL alone called for a more engaging and active process, such as a survey, where I could ask you. I know not all of you were involved in taking the survey, and I appreciate you being here regardless of that. I know some of you did take the survey, and I just kind of appreciated that feedback and the process of having to, of asking somebody to do this, and thank you for volunteering, by the way, to do that. And it was just much more of an experiential learning opportunity, hopefully for you as well. Alright, so the case study. Participants were recruited from the urban middle school setting. It was limited to parents and guardians of students with mild to moderate learning disabilities, students with mild to moderate learning disabilities, and faculty from the site, staff members, and administrators. The age range was from 12 to 65 years, males, females, all ethnicities included. There were no efforts made to encourage certain ethnicities or certain genders to participate. It was basically anyone who fit within the category of parents and guardians of these students, the students themselves with the mild to moderate learning disability, and the faculty from the site. The case study itself, the survey was administered after obtaining permission from the school administrator, and actually at the district level as well. I had to obtain permission from superintendent of the school district. Precautions were taken to avoid undue influence, which basically means that because I am a teacher at this school, I needed to make sure that students and staff didn't feel obligated to participate. To go a step further with that, I noted some disclaimers on all the forms that I sent out, which some of you received, and I know you saw this, where it says right to refuse or withdraw, saying that the participation in the program or in the survey for this thesis study was completely voluntary, and that you had the right to ask questions, report concerns, or not take the survey at any time, even if you had agreed to do so in the past. There was a letter of introduction for the EAL program study sent to participants. There were a total of 65 letters sent out. 42 interest letters were returned, 4 from parents, 4 from students of those parents, 31 staff members, and 3 administrators. So out of a total of 65, we got 42 back. Then the next step involved me sending out a consent form and attaching the survey to it so that we could kind of speed up the process and have it, instead of going back and forth with this mail process by sending stuff in the mail, we could avoid one more step and just have participants send back their survey. I think I kind of skipped through this. I sent out these letters through the mail so that there would be no physical or personal contact with participants, and just once again to avoid the whole undue influence factor. So the participants could sign the consent form, then complete the survey and return it in one envelope. All 42 participants responded to the surveys. Yay, thank you. The only thing was that in hindsight, and this is something that my mentor brought up to me, in hindsight, sending the survey with the consent form and having it returned in one envelope kind of voided any anonymity of the survey responses. So basically, I kind of knew who was responding to the survey because they sent it back with their consent forms. Obviously, most of you didn't mind, but that's something that I have to keep in mind for future research, and something that I did note on the summary and conclusion of the thesis, so that future researchers or individuals who are interested in doing this process are aware of of what happened there. The survey questions, there were a total of 9 questions in the survey. The first 3 focused on the participants' familiarity and their background with EAL, as far as their personal experiences with horses. Here's what those look like. I know some of you are familiar with this. Indicate how familiar you are with Equine Assisted Learning. How have you or your child ever participated in horseback riding activities? If yes, please explain the type of activity. The next 3 questions pertain to the advantages and disadvantages of implementing such a program. Yeah, oh yeah, that's fine. She can go, no worries. No, don't worry, Mom, it's okay. So would you perceive what would you perceive the advantages of such a program to be? What would you perceive the disadvantages of the program to be? And just directly, would you support such a program? And we'll get more in depth into these questions. I'm going to show you some graphs as far as the results are concerned. The last 3 questions, 7 through 9, were not as cohesive as the first 6 as far as their topics, but were kind of deemed necessary in order to gather more information from the participants. Participants were asked what their role was within the school setting, any questions they may have, and would they like results of the survey. Here are some pros and cons of the survey. Do you have a question?
No.
All right. All 42 participants returned and responded to the survey questions. That was huge. That was definitely a positive thing. The survey encouraged participation and engagement from participants. That was more evident in some questions than others, but overall the feedback was very positive. And it was entirely voluntary. I promise I didn't bribe anybody. The cons basically were that the format was not very conducive to the ease of data analysis. It made the analysis of the data a lot more detailed and involved than I thought it would be at first. And the other thing was that attaching the survey to the consent form voided anonymity, and that was not my intention. Okay, so results and findings. There's question number 1. Basically, this graph is telling me that not only did all 42 participants respond to question 1, but that out of all 31 staff members, only 3 thought or felt that they were familiar or very familiar with EAL, which was very interesting to me because staff members made up the majority of the responses, or the respondents. Question 2, all 42 participants responded, and although the majority noted that they had been exposed to activities involving horses, interestingly enough, most participants are not familiar with EAL, which helped me conclude or speculate that engaging in activities that involve horses does not necessarily mean that you'll be exposed to EAL. So that was pretty interesting. Question 3, it asked participants what type of activity, horse activity, they've been involved in. Only participants who chose yes for number 2 as far as involvement with horses were asked to continue on to this question. I found out that the majority of participants involved with horses did so during horseback riding activities. And that owning a horse seemed to have no bearing on whether someone was familiar with the term of EAL or not, which I thought was interesting as well. Question number 4, there were a total of 85 responses because participants were allowed to respond to choose more than one option and add to their responses as well. Yeah, you can go, there's a door back there, you can just go back. No worries. The majority of the respondents were school staff, so it was no surprise that financial and insurance concerns were at the top of the list, because as a school district we worry about budgeting and insurance, liability insurance, and the finances of supporting a program like this. Question 5 asked about the advantages to having a school-based EAL program. There were a total of 75 responses because, once again, participants were allowed to choose more than one response and even contribute their own. The response chosen with most frequency was that the advantage of having a school EAL program would be that we would have a unique program in our district, which I totally agree. Question number 6, would you support a school-based EAL program? Originally, only 2 responses were available, yes or no. Well, a participant chose to add his own response of "I need more information." This participant happened to be the district superintendent, and it is no surprise because he's also known as the person ultimately in charge of approving such a program. Yeah, right? So that was of no surprise to me that he felt he needed more information before he could say yay or nay as far as his support for such a program. That's kind of expected, exactly, right? Question number 7. The identification of participants in the survey. This question basically asks participants to disclose their identity. Are you a parent? Are you a student? Are you an administrator, staff? All 42 participants responded. Question number 8. Encourage participants to share their issues that they felt I did not address in the survey or that were not addressed in the survey. 9 participants responded, but there was no responses from parents on this one. Number 9, interest in survey results. Majority of participants opted to receive the survey results. However, I have to note that students showed little, if any, interest in the results of the survey, which is completely fine. As we know, I think they really just did me a favor by filling out those surveys. So. Alright, so here are the summary, the results and the findings. The majority of participants, 39 out of 42, expressed their support for a school-based EAL program. That is my answer to my thesis question, basically. Is there an interest out there? Well, based on this small participant pool, 39 out of 42 participants said yes, they would be interested and they would express support for such a program. Alright. A little bit about research in EAL. As a field in equine assisted services, there are major challenges. The research documenting the benefits of such a field have not really kept up with the development of the field. Most of the data is qualitative in nature, like our surveys, just kind of opinions and feedback, not necessarily numerical data that can be substantiated with scientific data. So it's a little iffy. We need more quantifiable data in order to add scientific credibility to the field, right? So this presents challenges in funding because, for example, in grants, individuals, organizations, the government, when they're giving grant money, they want to know that there is data out there proving that this is effective and their money is going to go into, it's going to be well spent, basically. So that's how that presents some challenges in funding. There are organizations out there, such as the Horses and Humans Research Foundation, that are strictly dedicated, among other things, to conducting, gathering, and promoting research through the offering of grants to organizations that are willing to run substantiated equine programs that produce that quantifiable data that we so desperately need in the field. That's it. Yeah, questions? Thank you. Have a seat, please. No, I'm talking to you. You are certainly part of the group, so you can. Do you have any questions about what's going on, about what I just presented to you guys?
No.
It's okay, Mom. No worries.
What?
But are there any questions? Let me turn this off, and we'll talk about any questions you may have. See if I know how to do this.